Hey guys, so in today's episode we're going to be talking about 7 common mistakes that hockey players make with their training that's holding them back and not helping them to achieve their performance goals. So I'll dive right in, and number 1 is bodybuilding training only. Now there's nothing inherently wrong with bodybuilding style training. It can be very, very beneficial for improving muscle mass and for just generally improving your physicality. Maybe as you've got an aesthetic goal alongside a performance goal, 100% there is very, very beneficial in those areas. But when it's only what you do, it's not going to have a huge amount of transfer to the pitch. And that is the common issue that I see, is where players come to me, they've perhaps been training hard, they've been throwing themselves into some sort of training sessions they've either been given to do or they've found, but because they haven't got that relevance and transfer, they don't really notice any difference. And I spoke to someone recently about this, who's now a client, and they had these challenges where they felt like they were training super, super hard, but just weren't really getting anywhere with their training. And as soon as we had a program that was dialed in, was relevant to them, was individualized, was specific to the nature of the sport of hockey as well, suddenly those issues went away and they started to have a direct performance impact, which is the most important thing of all. So when you're only doing bodybuilding style training, one of the key problems there is that it doesn't transfer across directly to performance. It's just kind of a more general sort of training aim. And if we had a continuum of general to specific, then the general side would be bodybuilding, it would be long runs, it would be just generic circuit style training, that kind of thing. The specific end on the very extreme would obviously be hockey itself. And so what we're trying to do is strike this balance where we're doing things that have transfer and also general training that provides a kind of a base of athleticism underneath that, so that we can build upon it, as opposed to just always doing highly specific work. But when we're doing only this generic stuff, then that's where we don't see any direct transfer. And ultimately the sort of sign or success of any real program is on the pitch. It's not just numbers in a gym or how you look. It is actually what you're doing on the pitch in terms of your performance. Is your performance improving, or is your performance not improving? Are you achieving your performance goals? Are you not achieving your performance goals? That's it. That is the success of the program fundamentally. And yes, you might have secondary goals, maybe related to injury or related to performance, but fundamentally, if you are not improving your performance, then the program is not working. It's as simple as that. So if you're only doing bodybuilding training, then that is where the issue lies. Number 2 is not doing enough strength training. Again, a common issue I see is loads of players doing tons of hockey in the week, and you might be doing club, school, university, you name it really, summer league, indoor, throughout the course of the year, depending on kind of your age and the context you're finding yourself in. So doing loads and loads of hockey, but no supplementary work to stop yourself from hurting yourself through that volume of work. Fundamentally, at a basic level, the benefit of strength training is keeping you fit, healthy, and able to do the sport you love. That's kind of the first and most important thing, really. And if you're able to be available and injury-free throughout the whole course of a season, then you are an infinitely more impactful player than someone who's pushed really, really hard in their training, got a lot fitter, a lot stronger, but then hurts themselves because they've overtrained. Then they're completely useless because they're not even on the pitch. So you're trying to strike this balance, and that's the benefit fundamentally of strength training. So if you're not doing enough strength training, you should start, basically. And generally, I would advise initially 2 sessions a week is more than enough. In the off season, that can be 3 for more experienced athletes. It could even push it to 4, but generally speaking, with the volume of hockey that most people are doing, 2 to 3 is usually about right in the week. And they don't need to be super long either. I'm not talking like 2-hour sessions. Up to an hour, you can get a lot of high quality work done. It doesn't need to be a lot of volume. Again, we're trying to supplement and complement what you're doing on the pitch, not just add more volume for the sake of it. Number 3, not loading the calves enough. Now, there are 2 aspects to this. One, the calves have got a very important role in ankle stability and ankle injury prevention. So if you're not doing enough there, you're probably going to increase the risk of hurting your ankle. Ankle injuries represent about a third of non-contact hockey injuries. So if we're not doing something to reduce the risk of injury, specifically by loading the calf, then again, you're putting yourself at more risk. How can we go about doing this? Well, there's only certain ways the ankle joint can actually work. You can only really plantar flex and dorsiflex, in other words, pull your toes up towards your shins and point them away again. So in order to train the calves, fundamentally we need to be doing calf raises of some capacity. We can do them seated, we can do them in standing, but also plyometrics. So making sure you're including some good quality plyometric training in there as well. They're obviously trained when we're running naturally, but fundamentally, at a more basic level, we need to build up the capacity by doing more isolated calf work to build that tolerance to volume before then incorporating more higher intensity plyometric drills, speed drills, that kind of thing. But if you're only doing hockey and you're not doing that supplementary work, again, you're just going to put yourself at risk there because the ankle's at risk. And the reason for that is there's a lot of unplanned change of direction, usually in response to a quick change on the pitch. You have to change your position, particularly if the surface is a bit slippy in the kind of winter months, that type of thing. You're going to risk hurting yourself even more. So make sure you're training those calves at least twice a week, ideally 3 times a week in some capacity. Mix it up, make sure you're doing soleus targeted work, gastroc targeted work, both in seated and standing, single leg, double leg, plyometric versions. Make sure we're getting good volume in there. Number 4, not tracking loads. If you're not sure why you aren't making progress in the gym, it's probably because you're not tracking the numbers. So making sure that you're tracking on a week-to-week basis what the loads you're lifting, what's that as a percentage of your 1RM. And if you are serious about this and you really want to make a big impact on your strength, your power, your performance, then we should be aiming for loads at least 70% of your 1RM and ideally pushing towards 80% depending on the period of the season, sometimes above that again, pushing above 80% when we're trying to really chase those big numbers during the off season. But generally speaking, above 70% twice to 3 times a week is needed in order to maintain that sort of top end strength. But if we're really trying to push, then again we need to be going above 80% if we're really trying to push and get above our kind of habitual level of strength and overload our body in that kind of way. Number 5, not training consistently enough. Say this all the time, but longevity is king. It's making sure you can do something that is sustainable for the long term. So let's take 2 people. One person trains for 6 weeks, and in that time they train 5 times a week, super heavy, challenging work. They're really pushing themselves hard, and after 6 weeks they're burnt out, tired, possibly injured, and run out of steam with it essentially. Or you've got someone who's doing 3 sessions a week. The sessions are only 45 minutes long. It fits around their schedule. They're not always pushing. They're just making sure they're hitting good quality techniques and sufficient loads to maintain and increase strength over the long term, but knowing that accumulation of training is the single biggest factor that will help them to get strong in the long term. Who do you think in 5 years' time is still going to be doing that? Obviously, it's going to be the person doing 3 times a week who can stick to it. And a lot of that, therefore, is habit and behaviour change. It's making sure that what you're doing is something you can sustain for a number of years, because if you add up all of that volume and the compounding effect of year upon year upon year of training, after 5 years, you would have accumulated a significant amount more. You're doing 3 sessions a week. Let's say you're training for 40 to 50 weeks of the year. Let's say that's 120 sessions to 140 sessions, something like that you've done. That is a huge amount of volume that you've managed to accumulate there. And as long as you're performing the right exercises with the right technique, as long as you're progressing it in a safe and appropriate manner, you're going to get very strong over a number of years doing that, versus the short-term thinking, 6 weeks, push, get injured, lose momentum, lose motivation, and think that strength training doesn't work, or that somehow you're not doing it right. But the truth is you're not doing it right. You need to be thinking in the longer term. Okay, so that's number 5. Number 6, not doing enough high quality speed work. The main thing I always say to people with their training is your training should give you what your sport does not. And if you're just doing more of the same, so you're doing more hockey specific skills, more on pitch stuff, just more hockey in general, then you're not getting exposure to the things your body needs to improve it, which the sport itself isn't giving you. One of the things that the sport of hockey will not give you is out and out speed development, because think about the context. You're always running with a stick. You're going to be fatigued. You're going to be changing direction and decelerating, and most of the distances you're sprinting over are actually shorter than the distance required to achieve maximum velocity. So you combine all those factors, and it's very unusual for a player to hit above that 95% threshold that we should be aiming to achieve to continue to develop maximal speed. Now, on one hand, you could argue that you never need to run at top speed unless something's gone horribly wrong as a defender. For example, if you've lost the ball as a counter attack from the opposition, you have to sprint all the way back to the D to save a goal, and then something might have gone wrong there. True, it doesn't happen that often, but again, this is where maximal speed training actually increases the threshold of our ceiling of speed, if you like, in order so that everything else below it becomes easier, more mechanically efficient. If you imagine that you take your top speed from 7 meters per second to 7.5 meters per second, well, 5 meters per second, which is usually regarded as like a high speed run, so it's still a relatively fast run, is that much more efficient for you now, because it's a relatively smaller percentage of what we call the anaerobic reserve. Okay, so the difference between your aerobic speed and your max speed gives you a kind of a threshold here, a reserve, and if you can raise that top bar, the max speed, then everything below it percentage wise gets easier to run at. So if you've got two people trying to compete with each other on the pitch over the course of a game, and one person's significantly faster, not only are they more impactful because they can actually make a difference on the pitch, but secondly, they can sustain higher speed running for longer because it's more efficient for them. It's taking less, there's less cost, there's less metabolic cost for each effort they're putting out, if that makes sense. So in order to achieve high quality speed work, there are easy ways to which we can include this. And the warm-up is probably the single best opportunity to do it, because it doesn't mean you're adding in more, and obviously high speed development and sprint work can be fairly fatiguing if we're doing it in large volumes. And the good news is you don't need to do large volumes in order to get exposure to it on a week-to-week basis. This is why I ordinarily would suggest that if you're going to do speed work, and I always get my clients to do this, I get them to do it on a day where they're already at the pitch, so they're not doing more work than they need to. So if you're already at the pitch, you're about to go on and do a training session, you can bolt this on 5 minutes before the beginning of the training session as part of an extended warm-up of 15 minutes. That last 5 minutes, you could get 3 exposures to 90-95% of top speed with something like a rolling 20-meter sprint, where you build speed for 20 meters, sprint maximally for 20 meters, recover for probably, if you're doing a 3-second 20-meter sprint, something like a minute probably is going to be enough to get that 1 to 20 work to rest ratio. Sometimes that could be even longer. Some people would advise for every 10 meters you do a minute of rest, so it could be 2 minutes if you're doing a 20-meter sprint. Depends on context here, depends if you've actually hit that top speed or not. If you've got ability to have a GPS and measure this stuff, then amazing, because then you can actually get an accurate score of your top speed. But if not, then it might just need to be that you time yourself over 20 meters, and if you've hit that 95% threshold, then brilliant, you've done that, that's great. If not, then just turning Alexa off, then you know that you can continue to work towards that. If you've only achieved 90%, then you have another effort, but making sure we're getting one exposure at least twice per week to above 90%, 95% is the aim here for top quality speed work. Final one then, lack of planning, number 7, is that you haven't really planned the week, you haven't structured your training effectively, and so you don't really know how to put it all together. So, what sessions to do when in the week. For example, how you're going to sequence the training week to week. So if you've got, a particularly busy week or 1 week, how are you going to structure that so that you can ensure you're not burning out in the wrong weeks, you're getting adequate recovery in there as well. So week to week, making sure the sessions themselves are structured out correctly. When we've got the mesocycle, the kind of monthly block, how are you sequencing those weeks to make sure you've got high weeks and low weeks? And then more broadly across the course of the season, you've got your in-season, off-season and pre-season. How are you structuring those blocks to make sure that you've got the right thing at the right time? So you're focused on, the right things. You're not doing bodybuilding training mid-season, for example, or not getting exposure to max speed in-season. All of that is important. So if you're not planning it out, again, it's a big mistake, because you're not going to be able to kind of accurately work towards the things and work back, reverse engineer when you need to be peaking in the season, what the major competitions are that you're trying to aim for, what are the most important matches, and so on. So if you're making those 7 mistakes, don't worry, because most people are, but hopefully this will help you just to know that you are making them and to do something about it. So just to recap, those 7 are training like a bodybuilder, not doing enough strength training, not doing enough calf work, not tracking the loads week to week, not training consistently enough, not doing enough high quality speed work, and finally a lack of planning. So if we use inversion thinking, which I learned from Charlie Munger, the famous investor, basically just flip that round and think about, okay, if that's what I would do if I wasn't going to do well or wasn't going to achieve my goals, the flip side to that would be that I wouldn't train like a bodybuilder. I would train like an athlete who was trying to improve in their sport. And if you think about top level hockey players, they are not training like bodybuilders, they're training like athletes. I would be doing regular strength training to make sure that my body is robust, strong and powerful to be able to perform on the pitch and reduce the risk of injury. I'd be regularly training my calves to make sure that the risk of injury at the ankle joint is lower and my calves can tolerate the amount of volume they're expected to do in a week. I would track my loads week to week so I'd know if I'm making progress in certain strength scores or not. I would train consistently, so I wouldn't be doing, the two ends of the spectrum, 1 or 6 sessions per week. I'd be aiming for sort of 2 to 3 really good quality sessions every single week, even during the season. I would be doing high quality speed work at least twice a week, usually in the warm-ups as an extended warm-up to get good exposure to high speed running above 90%. And then finally, I'd be planning my year out, my months out, and my weeks out so that I knew exactly what I was trying to work on at any point of the season. So I hope that's been useful. Those are 7 common mistakes. Don't worry if you're making them, if you're just trying to do something about it.